610, Strategies for Established Corporations. I'm on page 282 of the textbook. This was another case study analysis that you read in relation to a biotech type invention. There's two questions that I have there for you. The first is, how did the company decide to pursue insulin production? And in particular, how does this relate to fence type patents? So on the bottom of page 283, you indicated that when they were looking at existing processes that created this type of biocon, they used this type of yeast for insulin production, or at least manufacturing. It indicated that they saw there was a lot of stuff in the United States. But what they saw by that was that there was, in particular, Baker's yeast and E. coli were the basis for making this insulin type production. And what they didn't see, and this is the key point, they did not see that a particular type of yeast, chia yeast, was actually being used to as the basis for manufacturing insulin. So in short, what they saw was when they did a patent type analysis of the companies that were out there and the basis that they were using to create the standard type insulin on the market, what they ended up noticing was that there was a deficiency. Nobody was using this particular type of yeast. And so to a certain extent you may say, okay, well, they saw an opportunity in the market, but that's the whole reason that you really do a prior art search, so that you can, there's actually two reasons for the prior art search. One, to make sure that your process that you've come up with or your invention is novel, new, and non-obvious. But in addition, you can do prior art type research to determine market opportunities, and that's exactly what is occurring here. They saw a market opportunity of a particular strain of yeast that was not being used as the basis to manufacture insulin, and that was what they ended up proceeding with. Now, from the point of view of, is this a fence patent or not, the concept is almost very similar to fence type patents, where we have this fence around our core technology, and then we start trying to see what else is out there, what's the closest fence to what it is that we already have protected, and we get additional protection, assuming that there's coverage in the specification, all the way up to where it is that that border is to the next fence. And that is what it is they were doing here. They saw all the different fences that were already there, and then they did a carve out of the fence lines next to all those already previously established fences for the purposes of building a new property around this manufacturing of insulin based off of chia yeast. So to a certain extent that would limit what other companies were doing as far as would they be able to go into chia yeast? No, they would not be able to use the chia yeast for the purposes of insulin production. And so from that point of view, it did fence in some of the competition and other players that were in the market. As far as how did the company decide which markets to pursue patent protection in, and what about potential foreign protection? Now, one of the things that the Ms. Shaw indicated, and this is on the bottom of 285, top of 286, she discusses how it is that patenting can be a very expensive process, and yet she makes a key point that I want to point out. She says that the PCT lets you file and then gives you some time to decide in which countries it's worth pursuing. And so from their point of view, as far as filing internationally, they recognize that how it is that they were creating and manufacturing insulin could literally be applied worldwide, without jurisdictions. And so from that point of view, they would often file the PCT application because that would allow them the flexibility, freedom to enter any of these other countries as needed, based off of, for example, after a time frame, if they determine that there is a sufficient interest in those other countries, they could go ahead and then pursue it. Now, as far as other countries in particular, it talks about also how it focused on India and US. US is known very much for its biotech type protection. India, at a minimum, has quantity. There's just a very large number of people there, many within India that have issues with diabetes. And so there would be a whole market that would be covered. And because I believe Michelle was based in India, that it would make sense also to begin the protection there as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and now start our discussion of established corporations. One of the things to keep in mind, we've been discussing the mentality almost of startups and small and medium-sized business companies. When we get, and I would say that up until the mentality of startups is very unique by itself because they don't have money, and becomes a question of, all right, where do we allocate the dollars when we don't have any? When you get to a small and medium-sized business, then it really kind of starts getting to the question of, we have some money, so let's make sure that it's a wise allocation of the money to allow us to proceed forward to the next stage. Namely, we have these strategies, how we're going to implement them. When you get to an established corporation stage, money, by and large, is usually not necessarily the issue. Now, I would caution that money is always the issue, notwithstanding the size of the corporation or the company, because even in large corporations, they have a budget, they must maintain it, they have shareholders often that they have to report back to. So money is not necessarily an issue with respect to money existing. Money is often an issue with respect to budgeting. But if the patent department can budget for strategic type moves, there's usually a lot more flexibility in what it is that they can actually do. So with that said, let's go back to the integral question of why do we even get IP when we are a large type company. First off, as far as protecting the core assets, we need to continually innovate. In fact, there was a great book by Clay Christensen, a professor from Harvard, business professor, in which he looked at in the late 90s, why it is that some large corporations continue to thrive and others fail. And one of his conclusions there was, if there is not a continual innovation cycle that allows the company to respond to new market conditions, then often the company will fail. So this concept and need to continually innovate is not just a good idea, it's almost the company's livelihood for the next iteration of being able to survive for the next generation is dependent upon it. So from that point of view, they are continually, generally speaking, always patenting new matters, they are developing new matters, and they are trying to, one, take the focus of let's protect it from a core technology point of view, and then taking a step back, they are also protecting it from all the different angles which are much more relevant when you are a larger size corporation. So from a market protection or offensive, defensive, all those strategies become much more real when you're an established corporation because there's usually deeper pockets and more flexibility to actually do that. And not only that, but as far as the purpose of this core technology type patents, it can be to obviously protect the core technology. On the flip side, it may be to also be engaging in this type of path for the purposes of actually developing new licensing campaigns for the company. So when you're a larger size company, often you are also looking at where are my revenue streams? Where's my revenue coming in? Can I diversify things of that nature? And patents are often bundled into this bucket of we have protection. But most companies do not necessarily view that bucket of protection as also viable revenue streams. And so companies that understand this type of model will then aggregate assets based off of similarity of subject matter, similarity of technology, things of that nature. And then they will create separate licensing streams so that each stream can be independently licensed, and each of these streams can then provide different revenue streams back to the company. Qualcomm, for example, is a great example of this, where they will actually have product lines that are then licensed out to the market, and each of these product lines will create new revenue streams back to the company. Now, as far as established corporations, the leverage is often based off of also just the size of the corporation. So it's this large corporation, it's the gorilla in the room. How do they actually then at that point increase their potential as far as leveraging? And they can do it, one, obviously by positioning themselves in the market even better, by making their name known more. So for example, what I mean by that are there are some companies on the market that for decades were known as some of the top patent filers in the world, Canon, Microsoft, etc. And a lot of these companies, putting aside, for example, looking at whether or not they have robust specifications and things of that nature, at a minimum just had the reputation of being a very aggressive and heavy patent filer. And so the word on the street was, if you sue them, or if you go after them, or if you try to do a cross-license, there is a very high likelihood that they already have something that's related to that on the market, or something that's related to that for which they have protection. Just due to the sheer fact that they have thousands and thousands of filings on a yearly basis. Now, as far as positioning themselves against competitors, that's also related to that, because if they really do have all these filings, it allows them, if somebody comes against them, that they can immediately respond in a defensive type manner and say, well, actually, we have a lot of assets relating to this particular aspect that you're accusing us of. But on the flip side, it really allows the company flexibility. Do they want to go after them offensively? Can they respond defensively? Do they want to create some type of a cross-license program with another company, with another competitor? Is there a public image that we are trying to achieve here? So there's lots of thoughts that go into how it is that established corporations can use IP to increase their leverage, and at the same time to also expand the fences of their own protection. Now, as far as how do I manage, the reality is all of these literally could be highlighted. And so as far as aggregating, matters are coming in, matters are going out, and so it becomes a much harder task of actually maintaining and trying to aggregate things together into one centralized database. So the need to continually be doing an audit, it may not be necessarily on a yearly basis. It may be on a monthly basis, or literally on a weekly or bi-weekly, where you have somebody's whole job is just to manage all the IP of the company. You can also, there's companies out, external companies that will actually allow you to outsource that work as well, where they actually track it. As far as building organization structure, hopefully that structure is already in place prior to the time where it becomes an established corporation, and that's the reason why it's not highlighted here. So you have your organization structure in place, hopefully, and then it becomes just a matter of, are you actually maintaining it? When you have new matters coming in, are you aggregating them in a manner that actually makes sense? And not only that, but are you continuing to enforce compliance type considerations and policies that have been implemented in the company as well? These policies and this compliance ensure that whatever is being inputted into the database is being preserved in a manner that is necessary for later on. As far as confirming, again, the larger the corporation, often the more sticky this one actually becomes. Because if you are acquiring IP from another company, it sounds very simple, but the larger the corporations that are being merged in some manner, sometimes a new entity may be formed that's now a subsidiary. So you have a parent that's acquiring another company, and that those assets are being transferred into a new subsidiary. Sometimes that new company is just swallowed in completely into the new company, or sometimes that new company, into the parent company. And that new company sometimes may retain its entity under the old company, the acquiring party, but it may now be reporting as far as ownership to a different address. So there's a lot that can go on in an established corporation that you need to be aware of as far as making sure that the IP is flowing correctly from one entity to another entity, and ensure that at the end of the day, ownership is being maintained. Now, keep in mind that we talked about the policies and compliance as far as building your organizational structure, but now if you have acquisitions occurring, divestitures occurring, you need to ensure that your policies are being maintained when your sea of all the different ownership entities that you're over is actually continually in flux. And that can be hard, because if you just have one static company, things going in, things going out, you have IP that's acquiring, you have new employees coming in, it may be a little bit easier to just enforce a strict compliance type policy. But suddenly, if you have acquisitions coming in, divestitures going out, and you have new employees coming in from this other company, and they already had pre-existing employment agreements, and you had employees that are now leaving on a regular type basis, think of Google or Facebook or any of these large type companies where this really is the case. You can have the sea of constantly changing conditions, and you need to make sure that the policies, if anything coming in, are held absolutely to a T, and that when employees leave, you know that that everything has been transferred over to the parent company as needed. Namely, things have been signed away so that you do not have to suddenly have to contact this employee 3 years from now, trying to track them down to get their signatures so that you can pursue additional patent protection for an invention that they did while they were at the company. So it becomes very much necessary to confirm ownership and to confirm the policies that, again, are part of your organization structure are being implemented with all this that is going on. As far as developing IP policies and strategies, you obviously could do that when you're actually at this phase, but the reality is that hopefully that is already in place and that is already occurring, it's going forward. As I indicated with respect to innovation with the last slide, you want to ensure that the company is continuing to innovate and grow and develop. And that's with respect to even, it's the same with respect to these IP policies and strategies. To say that we simply have one static IP or patent strategy would probably not make sense, because patent strategy changes as time goes on. What the courts found last year may not necessarily be what they're finding this year, and I can assure you how the courts were acting 10 years ago is not how it is that they were acting 8 or 7 years ago. And how they were acting then is not how it is that they are acting now. Courts change, and as rules are implemented and laws change, we need to be able to be in a position where we can readily and rapidly change the strategy that is being applied to put us in the best situation as possible with this changing market. As far as investing, all of them are highlighted because at this phase you are continually generating, you are now positioning, and you probably have a whole reservoir of assets that have been granted, that have been issued, that you're now securing, that you're maintaining, and at the end of the day, they are in a position where you can use them offensively, defensively, market type considerations all across the board. So on one hand, you have your new stuff that's continually being generated, the disruptive technology cycle that actually is the specific term from Clay Christensen. You have the positioning where you can then actually use it offensively, defensively. This allows you to create revenue streams. And securing is simply where you see where everything sticks. You're making sure that everything is being maintained. You're doing proper allocation of dollars to where it is there's greatest opportunities. And at the end of the day, you may need a full-time staff or somebody that is on a full-time staff type position to assist you with maintaining and tracking everything. So let's look at a few examples. First is Hewlett-Packard. In 2009, it invested 2.5% of its total revenue in R&D. You may say, well, 2.5% is not necessarily that much. Nonetheless, that was almost $3 billion. that they went ahead and invested. Now you compare that to, for example, like IBM that invested 6.1%, or Microsoft that invested 14%. And you can definitely say that HP was not necessarily at the same investment levels as Microsoft or IBM, but nonetheless, it was significant when you look at the amount of money that was being spent. Now, they indicated around this time that displays are one big focus of the company. HP doesn't manufacture displays. It sells around 70 million of them each year on PCs, printers, and other products. And the problem that they were facing is if we could actually come up with a better way to make displays, we could license the technology to others, and at the same time it would lower our own production costs. So when they went in to actually determine how do we lower our own production costs, they saw that if we could suddenly be manufacturing our own displays, not only would that significantly decrease our own production costs, but it may allow for a new revenue stream. They said displays are produced essentially one at a time, and this is conventional type methods. Now, but a team at HP developed this roll-to-roll process that would allow you to literally print circuitry onto screens one after another. It would speed up the processing time as far as being able to get through production all of these displays. HP was able to stay much more competitive in the market because they came up with new ideas. They saw where it is that they could decrease their own internal costs, which led them to get engineers involved to come up with new ways to create the displays. And at the end of the day, the new way to create the display was completely novel. And so that could create licensing type opportunities for HP as well to pursue as well. Microsoft is another obvious large type corporation. Now they have a very interesting approach to innovation. A lot of other companies, for example, your R&D may be housed under the actual corporation itself. For Microsoft, they actually have a pure research group. It is no strings attached. It's a separate entity apart from Microsoft. Indicates that Microsoft researchers come from a wide range of disciplines, psychologists, ethnographers, sociologists, mathematicians, and others. There's over 1,000 researchers across the world. I actually don't know what the current number is, but it's usually a very high number of researchers across the world. And the question is, all right, what do the researchers actually focus on? When we're looking at HP, there was a specific problem that influenced what went back to the engineering department, et cetera, et cetera. Microsoft says they do not give a focus to their researchers. And the focus that they take instead is the goal is to hire smart people and give them the chance to pursue topics they want to work on, he said. When you give them that freedom, they naturally want to work on things that are intellectually challenging in their own right. And the people who commit to work in research labs not only have that academic passion, but they want to have an impact on the world and change something. So in short, they let them loose and say, do whatever it is that you can that's intellectually stimulating to you. And the idea here is almost, when we're looking at Thomas Edison, if you have all these teams innovating and coming up with lots of little things, statistically, the more little things you're coming up with, the position that puts you in to discover large things. And so Microsoft is in a position where they have all these teams that are working on things at the same time, and all these teams may be working on different things. And the idea is with all these different ideas coming in, it creates a funnel system by which they can then pick out the big ideas that potentially may have an impact on the world. Now IBM, when it talks about when the recession hit 2008-2009 timeframe, IBM specifically did not reduce its R&D budget. Now, again, that might seem counter-logical to especially the finance department in IBM. Hey, we're reducing all the budget for all departments. Why not R&D? But IBM's focus is, they said, I've never been pressured to look for places to cut. IBM is not a luxury or public relations play. It is essential. Or research is not a luxury. Research is essential to the company's survival. And that is very much what it is that Clayton Christensen, again from Harvard, who indicated that you must look at research from this point of view, not just as some add-on, not simply as something that you've acquired, but rather it is a cycle, and it is something that you must continually be innovating, otherwise you die. IBM sees this as integral to the company's survival, and that is very much the case. So IBM, in fact, has increased R&D spending 21%, and that is in context from 2002. 2009 has spent almost $6 billion on R&D, an almost astronomical number. The company employs 3,000 researchers across 8 labs worldwide. IBM has held the record for the most U.S. patents issued in a year for the past 17 years. So, and this was actually a few years ago when this report was made, but nonetheless, it still emphasizes that even in the midst of a recession, IBM continued to allocate dollars for R&D because they viewed it as the means by which they would be able to survive and come out of this recession on top.